Whispers of turmoil are once again echoing through the gilded corridors of Buckingham Palace. In a move that has left both courtiers and the public stunned, King Charles III is said to have taken one of the harshest decisions of his reign so far, cutting ties with Queen Camilla's children, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, in the aftermath of a corruption scandal that has shaken the monarchy to its core. For decades, the blending of Charles's royal bloodline with Camilla's family was seen as an uneasy compromise, tolerated but never fully embraced by the institution. Now, under the weight of explosive allegations, that fragile balance appears to have shattered beyond repair. The breaking point reportedly came during a private confrontation at Buckingham Palace, where mounting evidence and pressure from both senior royals and the British public forced the king to act. For Camilla, the emotional toll proved overwhelming. Witnesses claim she fainted within the palace walls, undone by the realization that her husband's decision not only cast her children into the cold, but also jeopardized her standing as Queen Consort. The sight of Camilla collapsing under such strain has fueled whispers that the scandal is not merely a political storm, but a deeply personal tragedy unfolding behind the gilded facade of royal life. The gravity of Charles's choice cannot be overstated. This is not just about corruption allegations. It is about the king's struggle to uphold the dignity of the crown while protecting the institution from any shadow of scandal. Yet the cost of such resolve is painfully clear. The man who once defied tradition to marry the woman he loved is now being forced to sacrifice her family at the altar of royal survival. The tension is palpable, the heartbreak undeniable. What drove Charles to this drastic decision? Was it public outrage, pressure from within his own bloodline, or a desperate attempt to safeguard his legacy? And most importantly, can Camilla find a way to salvage her fractured family from the ruins of disgrace? These are the questions that now hang heavy over the monarchy. If you don't want to miss the latest revelations behind palace walls, make sure to subscribe to our channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay with us as we uncover the hidden battles shaping the future of the British royal family. On a gloomy afternoon at Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere felt as though the very walls were weighed down with tension. Camilla entered the room with her familiar air of composure, trying to embody the demeanor of a queen consort, offering a faint smile and a polite greeting as if everything remained under control. But Charles's gaze stopped her in her tracks. It was no longer the gentle look she was used to. This time his eyes were cold, unyielding, carrying the weight of the crown and centuries of history in that single moment. On the polished mahogany table before him lay a thick dossier, complete with photographs and detailed financial reports. Just as Camilla tried to start some light conversation to ease the mood, Charles cut across her with a severity he had never directed at her before. "You need to look at these now." His words were like a blade of ice slicing through the fragile pretense of normality she clung to. She stepped closer to the table, hesitantly reaching for the file. The first pages revealed images of Tom Parker Bowles in private meetings with dubious businessmen, alongside suspicious financial statements. Further along were documents implicating Laura Lopes in questionable investments tied to charities that were supposed to operate with absolute transparency. Each page seemed heavier than the last, pressing down on the room until it felt suffocating. Charles sat silently, watching his wife's reaction. But his eyes held more than anger. Beneath the icy exterior was profound disappointment, a slow-burning wound. He had wanted to believe that Camilla's family could fit into the royal fold, that public skepticism was nothing more than prejudice. But now, undeniable evidence lay before him. "Do you think I can simply ignore this?" he asked, his voice steady and deliberate, each word landing like a hammer beat against Camilla's heart. This was no longer a private family matter. This was the monarchy, the legacy of centuries, the image of the British crown before the entire world. Charles knew that if he chose to turn a blind eye, the cost would be the collapse of public trust, a burden future generations would be forced to bear. Camilla, though stricken with grief, could not escape the gravity of the moment. Her hands trembled as she held the pages, her eyes blurring with tears. In that instant, the harsh truth stood clear. Charles's love for her could not shield Tom and Laura from the scandal engulfing them. And for the first time, Camilla felt the crown, once the source of her greatest triumph, become the blade that threatened to tear her family apart. The unspoken question lingered in the silence. Could Charles forgive, when the very honor and trust of the monarchy were imperiled by those who bore the name Parker Bowles? And could Camilla possibly find a way to protect the children she had vowed to defend at any cost? The revelations within that thick dossier of figures and photographs went far beyond mere shock. They painted a damning portrait of how Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes had exploited their royal ties for personal gain. Tom, whose reputation had long been buoyed by his closeness to the royal family, wielded that position like a master key to unlock doors of power and wealth. He accepted payments from businesses in exchange for glowing reviews on his culinary programs and lucrative television contracts. What appeared to be harmless praise was, in reality, bought and paid for, turning his public image into a commodity built on royal privilege. Of power was found to have committed far graver offenses. Financial reports revealed that millions of pounds from a children's charity had been siphoned directly into offshore accounts. This was not only a flagrant violation of ethics, but also a devastating blow to public trust in the monarchy as a whole. When charities meant to symbolize compassion and social responsibility are exploited for personal gain, every lofty appeal made by the royal family falls under a cloud of suspicion. The public had already grown resentful of the undue privileges enjoyed by Camilla's family. Now, this scandal was like pouring fuel on a fire that had long been smoldering. In the eyes of many, the actions of Tom and Laura were not just a betrayal of the people's trust, but also a stain on the memory of Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Diana, two figures who dedicated their lives to preserving the integrity and transparency of the monarchy. For Charles, the evidence laid before him left no room for hesitation. Each page he turned cut away at the last remnants of illusion. He knew that if he remained silent, he would not only face the judgment of the public, but also the condemnation of history itself. And for Camilla, who had once tried to assure her husband that her children sought nothing more than belonging, not power, this was the ultimate blow. Could she still muster any justification? Or would Camilla be forced to bow her head and accept that it was her own family's boundless greed that had thrust the monarchy into the heart of a storm? This was no longer a private dilemma for Charles and Camilla. It was a stain with the potential to shake the very foundations of the crown. Camilla sat frozen before her husband, her face drained of color as the thick files lay sprawled across the polished wooden table in a secluded room of Buckingham Palace. Each page was a cold incision into the trust and pride she had long tried to preserve for her family. As Charles opened document after document, his voice hoarse with disappointment, Camilla shook her head repeatedly, almost begging herself not to believe what was unfolding before her eyes. "No, they couldn't have done this," she whispered, her trembling hand resting on a photograph of Tom with powerful figures at a private gathering, where secret payments had been arranged. To Camilla, Tom was still the witty, devoted son she had raised, not a man consumed by greed and willing to exploit the crown. And Laura, her gentle, reserved daughter, now stood accused of funneling millions from a charity fund. There must be a mistake. They're good people. If they've done wrong, it's just a misstep. They can make it right. Camilla choked, her reddened eyes brimming with tears. But Charles refused to let her hide behind denial. He slid across the table the bank statements that clearly traced the money offshore. Then came the photographs. And finally, the damning recordings of Tom's own voice in a shady discussion about trading favors for influence. Camilla, the evidence is undeniable. This isn't rumor, and it isn't some fabricated plot. This is the truth, Charles declared, each word landing like a hammer blow. At that moment, Camilla buried her head in her hands, as though trying to escape the crushing weight pressing down on her heart. She was trapped between two irreconcilable realities: the sacred instinct of a mother to shield her children at any cost, and the inescapable duty of a queen to safeguard the monarchy. Either choice carried a terrible price. To protect her children meant betraying public trust, but to sacrifice them for the crown would mark her forever as a ruthless mother. Finally, Lopes, Charles spoke again, his voice low but resonant in the suffocating room. He was no longer speaking as a husband, but as a sovereign confronting a crisis. Camilla, there is no other way. Tom and Laura must be cut off completely from the royal family. No public roles, no titles, no charitable involvement under the royal name. Every official tie must end. The words struck like a brutal sword, severing the bonds Camilla had fought to preserve for so many years. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Before her eyes, the dream she had nurtured, that her children might one day be embraced, sharing in the aura of the crown, crumbled into ashes. Charles pressed on, his voice laced with bitterness. This scandal is not merely a personal disgrace. It threatens the credibility of the monarchy itself. The public is furious. The press is circling like vultures. And more importantly, Parliament will not miss the chance to challenge the very legitimacy of the crown. If we do not act, they will act for us. Camilla trembled, her hands clasped together, her vision blurred by tears. She knew Charles's words were not born of coldness, but of the brutal reality of royal politics. A mistake could be forgiven. A corruption scandal tied to her children could become the calamity that shattered the very foundation of the monarchy. Inside, she was torn apart by a savage conflict. As a mother, she wanted nothing more than to embrace Tom and Laura, to shield them from the storm of public outrage. But as queen, she was bound to place the survival of the monarchy above all else. Could she really abandon her children to disgrace, just to preserve the throne? Or would she dare defy Charles and the entire institution to protect her family? The agonizing question echoed with every breath. Could Camilla bear a sacrifice of such magnitude? The scandal, however, no longer remained within the palace walls. Within hours, the front pages of Britain's biggest newspapers erupted with sensational headlines. Queen's children cash in on the crown. Corruption scandal rocks Buckingham. Royal trust in tatters. Images of Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes dominated the tabloids, no longer polished and respectable, but emblazoned with words like corruption, embezzlement, and abuse of power. Social media erupted. Outrage swept across the nation, with hashtags demanding investigations and financial transparency from the monarchy climbing to the top of trending lists. Angry comments poured in. Diana would be ashamed to see this. It's time to end the indulgence of Camilla's family. The royals must set an example, not become a safe haven for corruption. Whatever fragile trust remained was now on the verge of collapse, and every eye turned toward Charles. Parliament wasted no time. An official statement was issued, demanding that the king provide a clear account of the scandal surrounding Tom and Laura. Some MPs even raised the possibility of a public inquiry, an extraordinary but weighty step, one that directly threatened the legitimacy of the monarchy itself. Silence was no longer an option. Inside the halls of Buckingham, a somber gloom hung in the air. Advisors gathered for urgent closed-door meetings, warning that this was no longer a mere family embarrassment. Mishandled, it could escalate into a full-blown constitutional crisis, one where both the people and Parliament openly challenged the monarch's role in modern Britain. Charles, torn between paternal affection and royal duty, now found himself backed against the edge of the abyss. It was no longer just about the fate of Tom and Laura. It was about defending the credibility of the crown, something his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had spent her entire life safeguarding. Meanwhile, Camilla was on the brink of collapse, devastated by her children's public disgrace and terrified that she herself would become the target of the nation's fury. Not since the tragic death of Princess Diana had Britain's media been so consumed by royal scandal. The tabloids, long accustomed to feasting on every crumb of palace intrigue, now had a full banquet. Daily Mail splashed a sensational headline across its front page: Queen's children cash in on the crown. The Guardian went further, raising stark questions about the monarchy's transparency in a new era. The BBC aired a special program dissecting contracts and payments allegedly funneled to Camilla's family. The media storm not only stoked public anger, but also heaped unprecedented political pressure onto King Charles. Parliament moved swiftly. MPs from both the ruling party and the opposition united in calls for an emergency inquiry, demanding Buckingham Palace account for the explosive allegations. In heated sessions, some lawmakers bluntly asked, "Is the Queen being exploited to enrich the Queen's family?" The question reverberated through Westminster, fueling a tense, suspicious atmosphere. Others warned that unless satisfactory answers were provided, the monarchy would face a devastating collapse of public trust. Amid the political and media firestorm, Charles's senior advisors issued stark warnings. This was no longer just a financial scandal. It was a constitutional time bomb. If the people lost faith in the crown's integrity, the monarchy's authority, built not on political power but on respect and loyalty, could crumble. In a constitutional monarchy like Britain, the royals wield no direct political control, but they serve as the living emblem of national unity. If that emblem is tainted, the entire political foundation risks fracture. The pressing question now loomed: how would Charles and Camilla weather this storm? Would they remain silent, hoping the tempest would eventually pass? Or would they be forced into painful decisions to protect the throne? The truth was, time was running out. With each passing day, public trust eroded further, and pressure from Parliament mounted. Many began to whisper that if Charles failed to act decisively, he could become the fastest weakened monarch in modern history. This was not just a scandal, it was a crucible, a test of survival for the very future of the British royal family. Amid the chaos engulfing Buckingham Palace, the king's advisors were summoned to an emergency closed-door meeting, where the air was so heavy that every word carried the weight of a verdict. After hours of fierce debate, a shocking proposal was laid on the table. King Charles had three choices. The first, to deny all accusations outright, framing them as a calculated smear campaign against the royal family. The second, to admit partial wrongdoing but insist it was nothing more than personal transactions with no direct ties to the crown. And the third, the harshest yet deemed the only option capable of saving the monarchy itself, to sever all ties with Camilla's family. The room fell into silence at the mention of the final option. Everyone knew that, with public trust plummeting, denial would only pour fuel on the fire, as the press already held far too much evidence. A partial admission might ease public fury in the short term, but it would leave deep, lasting cracks in the bond between the crown and its people. Only one path promised a clean break: cutting the monarchy free from the tainted shadow of the Parker Bowles clan, leaving no room for accusations of exploiting the throne for private gain. But it was also the cruelest choice, for it meant Charles would have to sacrifice the family of the woman who had stood by his side through decades of storms. Camilla, so often seen with an air of composure, could not hide her trembling this time. She spoke up, pleading with her husband and his advisors that if pays must be cut, she had but one condition: her children must be guaranteed immunity from criminal prosecution. They can be shunned, they can lose their reputations, but they must not be dragged into court, she said, her voice breaking. She also insisted that she would be the one to tell them, rather than have them learn of it through the newspapers. In that moment, the woman long branded as the usurper of Diana's happiness revealed herself instead as a mother, willing to bear the brunt of public scorn if only her children could be spared the worst. The advisors sat in heavy silence, all too aware that time was slipping away. This was not just a decision about Camilla's family, but the ultimate test of her love with Charles. Would the king sacrifice his private life to safeguard the throne? Or would he cling to a compromise, risking an explosion of public outrage? Inside the dim palace chamber, the air itself seemed to thicken, for everyone knew that whatever decision was made that night would etch a dark new chapter into royal history. Later that evening, inside a secluded room at Clarence's house, Camilla sat across from Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with the weight of an unspoken verdict. With trembling hands, she laid a stack of documents on the table, her eyes red and swollen as if she had weathered a storm of emotion. "My children," she began, her voice hoarse. "It is time for me to tell you something I never thought I would have to say. From today, your connection to the royal family is officially over." Tom froze, his face draining of color. Slamming his hand against the table in anger, he shouted, "What on earth are you talking about? I've done nothing wrong but build a career. Who doesn't use a few family connections?" Laura, equally shaken, bit her lip, struggling to remain calm but breaking into a plea of her own. "I only wanted to keep my charity alive. Every penny was meant to go back to help others. It was just a temporary transfer. You know I never meant to harm anyone." Camilla shut her eyes tight, as though to block the tears threatening to spill. When she opened them again, her expression had hardened into a resolve she never imagined she would need against her own children. "Do you understand what you've done? You haven't just damaged this family's reputation. You've jeopardized the very trust that holds the crown together. The people have always looked to the monarchy as something above personal interest, and you've dragged that symbol into the mud." Tom and Laura kept arguing, their voices rising, but Camilla's words cut through like a knife. "There is no way out. If you cooperate, stay silent, and let the royal family handle this crisis, you will not face criminal prosecution. But if you keep resisting, the law will show no mercy, and I will no longer be able to protect you." In that moment, and Tom collapsed into his chair, his face twisted with fury and helplessness. Laura buried her face in her hands, her shoulders trembling as sobs broke free. Their eyes brimmed with anger and despair, but they had no rebuttal. The evidence was overwhelming: figures, photographs, recordings that could never be erased. Camilla sat in silence, her heart breaking apart. For years, she had endured the public's hatred to stand beside Charles, believing that at the very least she could shield her own children. Yet now, she herself was forced to deliver the cruelest verdict. In the eyes of the public, she was queen. But in that moment, she was nothing more than a powerless mother, sacrificing maternal love to preserve her husband's throne and safeguard the survival of the monarchy. A painful question still lingered. Would Tom and Laura accept silence to avoid prosecution? Or would they lash out with a desperate move that could drag the royal family into a new spiral of scandal? And more importantly, could Camilla bear the bitterness of her own children after such a life or death decision? But Camilla's fragile hope was quickly shattered. After the tear-soaked meeting with their mother, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes refused to remain silent. Just days later, in a stunning turn, the two stepped forward and declared they were being made scapegoats for the palace. Facing the cameras, Tom insisted, "We are not traitors. Everything we did was quietly approved. Don't let anyone believe we acted alone." The royal family knew everything. His words were like pouring petrol onto an already raging fire. Laura, tearful yet defiant, added, "If there is blame, it is not ours alone. The palace used us, and now they discard us as if we never existed." The accusations exploded across the media. Headlines screamed from the front pages. Queen's children accuse palace of collusion and corruption. Tom and Laura, we only did what we were permitted to do. Their public defiance not only left Camilla devastated, but thrust Charles into a peril more grave than ever before. What had begun as a crisis the king hoped to contain now threatened to spiral into a full-blown constitutional scandal. Parliament reacted immediately. An emergency session was convened, with MPs from both the ruling party and the opposition demanding answers. They pressed the palace to clarify whether the royal family had indeed quietly approved the misconduct Tom and Laura described. If such claims were ever proven true, it could deliver a fatal blow to the monarchy's already fragile legitimacy in the 21st century. Inside the palace, the atmosphere grew suffocating. Charles met privately with his senior advisors, his face weighed down with dread. One advisor bluntly warned, if this rebellion continues, it could utterly destroy the credibility of the monarchy. This is no longer a family scandal. It has become a matter of institutional survival. Even Charles, a man long accustomed to political storms, could not hide his unease. He knew that if the public believed Tom and Laura, the royal family would be seen as rotten to its core, hiding corruption beneath its gilded façade. Any misstep now risked etching an indelible stain on royal history. Camilla, meanwhile, was close to collapse as she heard her children's defiant words. She knew that, truth or not, their accusations had already sown seeds of doubt in the public's mind. While she had sacrificed her maternal bond in the hope of saving the crown, Tom and Laura had chosen confrontation, pulling the monarchy into an even deeper spiral of crisis. This crisis was no longer confined to a family matter. It had grown into a constitutional crisis, a brutal test for Charles in the early years of his reign. In a final attempt to quell the storm and salvage the royal family's honor, Camilla did something no one expected. She appeared in a live television interview, her face drawn, her eyes fierce, and openly acknowledged her children's wrongdoing. Her voice trembled, part broken mother, part queen forced to put the crown above all personal ties. Tom and Laura made grave mistakes. I will not cover for this. I will not deny it. As a mother, my heart is shattered. But as queen, I must speak the truth. The words sent shockwaves through Britain. The press, which had been relentless in its attacks, suddenly shifted tone. Many outlets praised her for placing truth above family loyalty. The public, enraged for weeks, began to show her sympathy. Some remarked, at least she had the courage to admit it, when so many others would have stayed silent. A wave of empathy spread as people saw in Camilla not only a monarch, but a mother torn apart, forced to sacrifice sacred bonds to protect an institution larger than herself. Yet the cost was immense. Just a day after the broadcast, Camilla collapsed at Buckingham Palace, exhausted after weeks of unrelenting strain. She was taken to hospital, fueling even greater public concern and debate. Some argued she had proven her devotion to the throne. Others felt pity, recognizing that however much she wore the crown, she remained at her core a mother enduring the anguish of watching her children slip into darkness. Meanwhile, Tom and Laura had no choice but to withdraw entirely from public life. No more television deals. No more glittering events. No more ambiguous foothold within palace walls. They vanished from the spotlight, their names now shackled to scandal, stripped of both power and respect. A bitter outcome, but one that allowed the monarchy to claw back a measure of credibility and strength. The message was unmistakable. No one, not even the Queen's own children, stands above principle and accountability. But victory left Camilla with an unfillable void. She had safeguarded the throne, but at the price of a shattered family. She had saved the monarchy, but lost the very children she had once fought so fiercely to protect. It was a pain no words could capture, a wound that may never heal. The haunting question remains, can Camilla ever find forgiveness and reconciliation with her children? Or will this tragedy forever divide them? History will have its verdict. For now, the public watches her every step, with admiration and with sorrow. And what about you? What do you think of Camilla's painful yet courageous decision? Does she deserve forgiveness and compassion? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden chapters, scandals, and untold turns inside the British royal family.